Recording in progress. Well, hello, Christopher.
Hello,
How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you. How are you?
Good. I'm wonderful. Thank you. Thanks so much for taking time out for us to be able to have this chat.
Yeah, I think it's important that we share some of our chats with the world.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
If you're cool with it, I wouldn't mind starting with learning a little bit. If you can just like give me a little rundown of what does the mental health system in Britain look like?
The mental health system in Britain is very mechanical. Like all healthcare in the Western world, it thinks of us in terms of a physical object that needs some kind of medication.
Right.
Um, I don't know if, on a psychoanalytic level, I suppose there are professionals that are profoundly good at what they do. But from my experience, I remember years ago, I went to the doctor with quite heavy depression, like over 10 years ago. And I was thinking of suicidal thoughts. And I went to the doctor and he gave me a leaflet. And on the leaflet, it said, if you're having suicidal thoughts, please visit this website for advice. And I left the doctor's surgery with a piece of paper and I was like, wow, now I really want to kill myself. Like,
Yeah, no
this
doubt.
is the
Yeah.
advice they gave me. I'd actually plucked up the courage over weeks to go and see a doctor about it.
Right.
And the doctors just aren't prepared. They're not equipped to deal with mental health in general. It's not something that they are trained in or acknowledge at all. And
Right.
as we know now from our spiritual journeys, that it's mind over matter. Mind is actually the most important part of our experience. And once we get the mind straight, then everything else just works itself out. So
Right.
I would say that it's inadequate in England in terms of preparing people to help people with mental health.
To actually help people. Yeah. Um, it's interesting. You were just saying that, going to a doctor's, there's actually a doctor named Dr. Daniel Amen. Have you ever heard of him?
No.
Okay, so he is a neurosurgeon or neuroscientist, maybe, but he specializes he specializes in ADHD. And one of the things that he spoke about was that 80% of people that are diagnosed with mental health are diagnosed from physicians that have never been trained on anything having to do with mental health. He also spoke of how mental health medication, for example, can literally just change your life in terms of next thing you know, you're homeless, you're a gambler, you're a serial cheater, you do commit suicide. A lot of the times when physicians are handing out these scripts, there's a lot of misinformation that's associated to those scripts, and people just assume that if the doctor's handing those out that it must be because that's what is required, right? It's so, unfortunately, it's an industry now where people make money versus care about our mental health.
Yeah, if anything, you could say it's detrimental to human health.
It is, yeah. But here's the piece, right? And this is the catch 22. Because, like you said, you go into, like, you are struggling, you feel like you don't want to live anymore, or your brain is running you in circles and you can't stop thinking about the hurts and the pains and the past and the trauma that you've been through. And you need to turn to someone because you need help, that you do. And now when you go to turn for help, this is who is there to help. It's like, oh, I'm so sorry. Here's your label. You're ill for the rest of your life. You have a chemical imbalance in your brain.
Here's your medication.
Here's your medication.
Here's your medication. So many people I know are on antidepressants and it hasn't helped them not be depressed.
Right.
You would think an antidepressant would alleviate depression, but it's almost like they're getting rid of the symptom and they're not getting to the root of depression.
That's right. Right.
But I would say it's a lack of understanding throughout humanity. I don't care how many PhDs somebody has in medicine, they have to understand what the mind is. And the only way you can do that is through meditation and contemplation.
Right. And I think that a big part here is that in order for people to actually recognize that they can subscribe to a new approach to mental health for themselves, that we actually look at where did this go wrong? How did it turn into the industry that it's become? And how are we now in a complete epidemic of mental health issues because of the way that this has been rolled out? And a lot of people don't understand that when the psychiatrist industry was going down in the end of the 60s, that big pharma bought out their bankroll. They decided, okay, listen, we will create the bankroll for you guys. We'll create the meds. You guys are responsible for the labels.
Yeah, and Big Pharma were also paying for the education of all the doctors who are psychiatry. So the difference between psychiatry as a modality of healing and meditation, for instance, is psychiatry looks at the mind, it analyzes the mind, it compares the mind, it does all of the mind. But at no point does it take a step back and just look at the whole thing as a thing.
That's
It
right.
gets into the nuts and bolts and it goes through all of the passageways and it explains the child and your mum and dad and all the stuff. But that's fine as an education.
Right.
But knowing all of those things doesn't help your mental health.
Right.
Reflecting upon and actually contemplating on your thoughts, beliefs, and assumptions is how you relax the mind.
Right.
It's becoming self-aware of the mind is the solution to mental health.
And I love that you say that, because, you know, there's been so many clients along the way that I'm talking to them about retraining their brain. It's a process. I mean, I've been doing it for 25, 30 years myself. And every single day I have to participate in this. And if I don't, trust me, it gets shitty, right? Like, but that's a part of where a lot of people are like, well, there's so many thoughts that I have in a day. How can I ever be mindful of my thoughts? And it's almost like people create an excuse of, well, because my mind has so many thoughts in a day, I can't control that. And I always say to my clients, listen, if you can tap into your thinking at any given moment, just actually observe what's going on in there. And then ask yourself, is this the thought that I want to be entertaining right now? Like, people forgot that they actually have a choice of shifting their own thinking, right? Like,
Right, yeah.
and I know that it sounds so woo-woo or whatever they want to call it. Like, it's this piece where people are like, oh yeah, that's too simple, that can't change, or the thought will keep on coming back.
Yeah,
But the
because
reality is,
yeah. You know, kind of. Sorry.
I was going to say, just the reality is that thought's going to keep on coming back until you figure it out. Why is it there?
Yeah,
Right.
and the thoughts are like the surface water, and then the beliefs are a little bit thicker, and then the assumptions are really deep in the
Right.
mind. And your thoughts are a result of your beliefs and assumptions.
Right.
So if you're having repeated thoughts, and they can be quite detrimental to our health, detrimental to our relationships, it's because somewhere underneath those beliefs is a belief, a limiting belief that's causing your thinking to be out of alignment with truly who you are.
Right.
And it's really, people need to understand, eventually humanity will understand, that we have an energetic sphere of energy following us around called the mental sphere of energy.
Right.
And it's like our mind, our brain is a radio receiver for thoughts.
Right.
It is receiving and sending thoughts, like a mail room receiving mail. Bow, 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 bow. And the thoughts we receive in our mind are results of the beliefs and assumptions we've held from our childhood. So that's why we've got 7 billion people on the planet, all with a different childhood, all with different parents, all with different experiences, all with different traumas, all with different. So we've got all of these different thoughts coming in and out of the minds of millions and billions of people. This is why we live in the pickle that we live in at the moment.
Right.
We have
Right.
politicians, healthcare workers, psychiatrists, doctors, all with mental health conditions.
Right. Right.
Right.
And
The
trust
people,
me, I swear to God, we're seeing the precipice of this. Like, we
like
really are.
we've got people with, like, I'm not saying they're not intelligent, like I'm not
Right.
saying they're not intellectual. They have PhDs in psychoanalytics and
Right.
stuff. They have PhDs in the understanding of psychiatry, and that is profound. Like, I don't have that,
Mhm.
but I have a deep, profound understanding of my own mind. And
Right.
that in and of itself, it's not just of my mind, it's just of mind, of what mind is and what we can use it for as a mechanism or a vehicle through which we experience reality.
Right. Right. You know, it's interesting. I have somewhere with me, you and I have had conversations in the past about wording,
Yeah,
about the way that wording has been utilized
yeah,
to manipulate concepts and constructs that they want to implement in society.
yeah,
I have the DSM-5 here, which is the Diagnostic Manual, Statistics Manual of Mental Health Labels. And when I first started looking into the history of mental health, it was mind blowing, because you look at like this small portion of labels and you look at this small portion of actual that word left, sorry. But there was just all of these different discrepancies that created an underlining dysfunction of that person.
Yeah.
And it was very clear, kind of clear cut. And now they've legitimately taken that book and looked at every aspect of human behavior. And
Mm.
now if you're a human, by default, they want to label you that, if that's the route that you go to be able to get support.
Yeah.
And the interesting part is that, again, we're in that precipice of like those two different earths almost, right? The old mentality and modality of believing that it's because we're sick, it's just our fate. They've been convinced that this is their reality and that they're going to be sick for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
Then there's a lot of other people that are starting to actually go, wait a minute here, that's not working for me anymore. And they are starting to open up and reach out to different modalities, look at different modalities that can actually help them acquire some sort of sense of self, instead of feel that splitness of like, no, you're not actually experiencing that. That's because you're ill,
Yeah. And it's funny because the mind of a doctor or the psychiatry or even the institution that backs it, no amount of books describing mental health disorders is solving the mental health disorder. If you go to a doctor and he's like, you have ADHD, what do the words ADHD actually do other than program the person who has a behavior and force that person to create a belief that they have something?
Right.
So when you get labeled, you have ADHD, I know people, and my friend, he got told he had ADHD 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I spent 6 months trying to convince him that he doesn't have ADHD.
Right.
And he's like, yeah, but I do. And I said, no, you don't.
Right.
You don't have ADHD. You do if you believe you do.
Right.
And he's like, yeah, but my characteristics, behaviors, and blah, 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 are of someone of ADHD. And I said, yes, but if you have characteristics and behaviors of someone that has characteristics and behaviors of someone.
Right.
Don't label it ADHD, because then you're locking yourself into that characteristic and behavior.
Right.
But if you just go, okay, I have these characteristics and behaviors, and those things can be changed. Characteristics and behaviors are a result of a mental situation.
Right.
So instead of going to a doctor and labeling yourself ADHD and then just living out your life taking medication for ADHD, simply ignore your doctor completely and study what it is that you have, and slowly peel back the layers of your behavior characteristics, limiting beliefs, and thought patterns until you no longer portray those characteristics and behaviors.
Right.
We don't need doctors giving us pills. We need to just slowly be, and we don't need doctors to be telling us how to do that, because the internet exists.
Right.
While the internet exists, we have every single piece of knowledge of human history exists on the internet. And all it takes is a due diligent person to go through some documents and contemplate reality and come to terms with some stuff and admit some stuff and forgive some people and heal. And we'll get into healing in a bit. But the label itself is absolutely pointless. It has no intrinsic value at all.
I love that you said that, because I mean, I've always said to my clients that, it's like, you go, for example, if I go to a doctor about my weight, they always look at, okay, so here is considered obese, here's considered balanced, here's considered under healthy, right? So we look at this sliding scale. And so when our doctors, when we're talking about weight, they're always talking about, so what can we do on the sliding scale to get you to that balanced place, to get you that healthy state of being? And there's always different suggestions. Go for a walk, eat better, sleep better, all these different things. Yeah. Now, for the most part, when you go to a psychiatrist or you go to a physician to talk about your mental health, they convince you that you have actually a chemical imbalance in your brain, and it's why you're on the sick level. So it's equivalent to saying to someone, I'm sorry you have heart issues, and we can't do anything to help you fix your heart. But yet we know that they could do things to help people fix their heart. So why is it the only industry that it just convinces people, no, you have a chemical imbalance and you have to take these pills in order to get that balance back in a par? Instead of talking about, going through all of these different things that you can actually do on that sliding scale, whether it's meditation, whether it's walking, whether it's dancing, whether it's jumping, whether it's whatever makes the energy move in your body differently, right?
Yeah, and the label or the medication is fine for profit and money, But the truth is, if somebody comes in and says, hey, I'm having these issues, I could say, well, you have the characteristics or behaviors of someone who has ADHD, that's fine.
Right.
But the truth is, do you feel safe?
Right.
Did you have an experience when you were a child? What's your relationship like with your mother? Psychoanalytics do go into that, and they do ask good questions, and they can alleviate a lot of trauma through that process. But the one thing that we're highlighting is that the entire system is built up on profit and medication, and they don't really want a population of people who are reflecting on their thoughts. Now, without getting into any conspiracy theories or anything, but they don't want a population of healthy-minded individuals, because that would create rational thinking people.
Right.
So when somebody is slightly outside of the society norm, you have the society norm, and then you have someone who's like acting a bit strange. It's helpful to label that guy nuts, crazy, a little bit bonkers, like ADHD, whatever you want to call it. You just label that person something, so society feels safe
Right.
that this person over here has a label.
Right.
But really, we need to be hugging everyone, loving everyone, providing that support, providing systems and techniques, methods and practices that will allow the individual not only to improve their mental health, to become aware of their own mental health.
Right.
This is the key factor in, we can improve mental health, but in the awareness of your own mental health, you're free.
Right.
You're completely free, because I still have mental health limiting beliefs, but
Yep.
I observe them, I'm aware of them, I come to terms with them, I accept them, I acknowledge them, I release them, I reprogram them. And in doing so, they no longer affect me.
Well, and I think that that's a big piece that we're seeing shift in society right now is, over the last 10, 20 years, as they've been pushing this mental health narrative for so long, and the whole like, don't shame people with mental health. We need to look at, where did this shaming come from begin with? It came from a segregation of our people being told, okay, this is what you should believe and how you should get help. Right. So it's a part of that. And like you said, I'm not getting into conspiracy theories, but we do recognize and see that there is an agenda of separation here, whether that's race, religion, whether it's mental health, mental illness, whatever that looks like,
Whatever
right?
it is.
Seriously, it's everything. But I think that a really, really big part of this too is that, we're at the point in society where some people have bought in and subscribed to and have married. I have this label, these are my meds, this is what I need to do for myself. And they're not willing to look at the opportunity that's before them to be able to actually expand themselves. But that's okay if it works for them. I'm talking about more so the people that just keep on saying, well, no, I have this mental health label. These are my issues. This is what I'm struggling with. And no, I can't actually heal because this is my issue. So they've convinced people that the healing process, that they can remove their own responsibility from that healing process at times. So it becomes that piece where you and I, being people that like in observing our own journey and looking at, okay, so where are my own limiting beliefs? What is my brain doing today? If I'm not feeling good, I know that my brain's doing something that's not helpful. So am I going to bring my awareness to the part of myself that is being unhelpful, or do I want to bring my awareness back to the part of myself that can manage?
Right.
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 And I think that it's about giving people back their accountability, saying, listen, you don't have to do this. You can manage your mental health in whichever way you would like. But at the end of the day, we're just giving you the opportunity to look above and beyond what you've been taught and programmed, to recognize that it is in your benefit to take accountability for your own mental health. Like, your happiness actually depends on that.
That's right. Yeah. And from my understanding, and it's really helped me to understand that the mind is here and the emotions are here and they're intrinsically linked. So how we're feeling is a direct result of what we're thinking.
Right.
And this relationship is going on in everyone's life, and I'm thinking this and judging this and categorizing things and labeling this and describing things and analyzing this and coming to conclusions about this, and the mind is just doing all these things, and as a result we go through different energetic fields: joy, peace, depression, anxiety, worry,
Right.
guilt, shame, anger, frustration, unforgiveness, doubt. It's all happening. So this relationship is always going on.
Right.
And you have the opportunity, we as conscious beings have the opportunity to step back from that situation and just be the witness of
Observing it.
And in doing so, both the mind and the body and the emotional body, they kind of stop,
Right.
because they're being witnessed. You're no longer in the thick of it.
Right.
You're not acting out this thought, and you're not speaking that feeling, and you're just, instead of being at the mercy of your thoughts and feelings, you have an opportunity to be still.
Right.
And in witnessing it, in a way, it calms the mind down, just as the witness of your mental health. And I mean, 10 years ago, I was clinically depressed. I was clinically depressed. I was angry, frustrated, pissed off, full of shame, full of guilt. And I've done 10 years now of soul searching and mental health rejuvenation, emotional releases. I've done my healing journey, still is going now. It's not something I don't think
Right.
I'll ever end. I really enjoy the process of it. And this is why I'm becoming an advocate to speak so openly. That's why our conversations are so exciting for me, because we get really into the nuts and bolts of what a mind is. And especially me being a man and you being a woman,
Right.
we're seeing it from the masculine and the feminine perspective as well. I've learned so much from our discussions, and yeah,
As well. Yeah,
it's
for
the
sure.
awareness. It's the awareness. It simply comes down to awareness of mind. That
So,
is.
so I have a question for you, because there's some people out there that, um, when we talk about spirituality in any means, there's a lot of people in the world that aren't spiritual, but that's okay. They're still conscientious in different ways, right?
Mhm.
So a lot of times when we're speaking in the fluent language that we speak in, because we are from a soul having a human experience perspective, there's a lot of people that may not connect with that, thinking that it's spiritual, and it has nothing to do with spirituality. It actually has to do with just being aware of your own consciousness, of the way that your brain is actually working, right? This is not about, I think that, underneath, when we actually dig and go, whoa, so what's underneath this spacesuit that's actually functioning this technology, then we really up the ante into spirituality at a totally different level. But even for someone that has no spiritual interest or doesn't believe in those kind of things, they still have the opportunity, if they so choose, to be the observer of their own experience and to actually recognize when their mind is a train wreck that's ruining their life, versus when they get their mind a little bit more in order and life starts working with and for them again,
Yeah,
right?
that's right. And it's exactly right. Spirituality is just a concept. It's just an idea. It's just a word that we've used. And the truth is, whether you believe that you are a soul living out a human experience, or you just think this is it and you think you're just an animal living on a planet, you're completely right. Mechanically, if you just think in terms of mechanics, mechanically, we're all the same.
Right.
There is nothing different between any human being on this planet mechanically. And mechanically, whether you are a more spiritual person or a less spiritual person, it doesn't matter.
Right.
It's about awareness, and everyone could at least admit that they have awareness.
Right.
Even if you're a spiritual or not, you understand the concept that you are aware that I'm moving my hand.
Right.
You are aware that you can hear my voice. These things are undeniable truths.
Right.
What is hearing my voice and what is aware of your hand is going into the realms of philosophical quandary and spirituality. But
Right.
you don't need to ask why we're here or what this is or what this experience is, just to become self-aware of your mental health.
Don't get
That
me
is
wrong though, yeah, sorry. I was gonna say, don't get me wrong though. The quicker that you can get into that position, the easier mental health is to start managing.
right. I mean, I fell into the rabbit hole deep. I was so fascinated by spirituality. I was so shocked that there were Buddhas and monks and people praying and doing Hare Krishna. And I was like, what is this? What is all
Oh,
of
and
this?
you like got to dive in deep. Like I was in the thick of it in the battlefield of humanity. Like you were allowed to like dive deep into
I
your
was
experience
I
of
was
that.
given a golden ticket in life.
Yeah.
And I literally separated from my partner, sold my house, and at exactly 30 years old, I left my old life. I drew a line in the sand, I stepped over it, and I was in India.
That's
And I
amazing.
was silent and I was fasting and I was praying and I was juicing and I was just in it. And the beard got bigger and bigger and bigger and the hair got longer and longer and the
Right.
tattoos arrived and the spiritual beliefs and the spiritual identity and I am spiritual and you're not spiritual and I am and the ego just plays all sorts of fucking games all the way through the process
That's
until
true.
you have more and more realizations, more and more epiphanies, the superiority that you're creating in the mind, the positioning is a survival mechanism. and you need to bring yourself down with humility and integrity, and you pull yourself further down out of your ego until your ego literally is just a personality.
Right.
You've developed humility and integrity to such a level that you understand you're never really going to get rid of your ego, because in order to interact with someone, you need some kind of sense of individuated expression.
Right. And not only that, but I think that this is that whole piece about how the industry misconstrues things to make it more complicated than it needs to, really, right? I believe that there's been the whole entire concept of getting rid of the ego. I feel like that is almost like a part of forfeiting self for the sake of other people, to be controlled by them in some sort of way. And a big part of that to me is that our egos can be super helpful for us to live out this physical existence if we can train it how not to be an asshole. If we can train it to focus on our strengths and be good with our strengths instead of focus on our trauma and trigger from that trauma.
Yeah.
It is super helpful. Like, for example, confidence is a great one. Like, confidence is something that comes, the ego has been developed in a way that it feels comfortable, secure, safe, and confident as vehicling the soul around.
It's kind of, but what we're referring to as the ego is a combination of lots of different things. It's not just a psychological thing.
Right.
It's the relationship between the psychological element of the experience and the emotional experience.
Right.
For instance, the reason we act like assholes when we're being egotistical is because of emotional triggers.
Right.
So when you purify your emotional body and you go through and you purify, your ego doesn't technically ever leave you, because
Right.
an ego is your sense of separation.
Right.
I feel like I'm over here and you're over there in Canada, and there are people in the street, and I believe that I'm separate from everyone else.
Right.
What your ego does dissolve to the point where you feel unity. Your heart is so open that the ego still exists, so I can have a personal experience with people.
Right.
But the heart is so open that you have humility and compassion and empathy, and you've developed integrity, and you've developed all of these things within you. Then you don't mind what your ego is doing.
Right.
Because I'm not reacting to things in an asshole way.
Right.
Because I've developed all of that love, and I've cultivated so much love inside me that I don't mind calling someone out if they're being a dick.
Right.
But I'll do it in such a loving, friendly, happy way that they won't feel attacked.
But I think that that's a big piece, right? Communication, the way that society has taken our communication right now. For example, we pull apart all these things, we throw in these concepts, and then we pull them apart until they mean nothing. The word narcissism is a great one. I pray to anyone out there that is actually in a narcissistic relationship that you are able to come out of that, find yourself, and move forward from that. But we have taken that word and we've literally ripped it apart in 900 ways. And now anyone that has a disagreement with someone else about an opinion, now all of a sudden you're a narcissist. You just, and it's like the way that we use these words that actually cast spells upon each other instead of actually love each other. Like, we think, we should take that. Where was the word narcissist over the last 10 years? And how has it become another tool once again to separate each other from each other? Right.
And I would just like to remind anyone watching this is that just be super careful what you label anyone.
Yeah.
Don't call if your partner is acting with narcissistic tendencies, do not call that person a narcissist. Do not even use the word, because words are spells. They're casting realities.
Right.
So if you say to your partner, you're a narcissist, you're developing within him a belief system that he is a narcissist, and thus will act according to what you call him.
Right.
And that is really important. Now, you can say, listen, your behavior and characteristics are just not working for me. It makes me feel this, and I feel this, and this, and this. But at no point should we be labeling anyone anything. We should say, I love you.
Right.
I care about our relationship. I want our relationship to work.
Right.
These characteristics just aren't working for me anymore. I don't want to be treated this way. I don't want to feel this way about them. You can do all of the communication in the world without labeling anyone anything.
But I think that this is where the whole aspect of ego and that narcissism come in, the conversation of the word itself, even in us seeing people's choices, preference, ego, create boundaries or standards, whatever they want in their own life.
Yeah.
it's like we're not recognizing that that is a function of the ego. Like there's certain narcissistic behaviors that are very intense and are, you know, I mean, if someone's trying deliberately to break you down, that's one of those things that that person's ego is still in their own trauma and creating
But
their own
yeah, but
projections, right?
they're not doing it deliberately, because all narcissism is unconscious behavior.
Right,
All
right,
narcissism, all hate, all everything, all of those things are unconscious within the human psyche. So
right,
even people that we're labeling, we actually shouldn't technically be labeling anyone anything. We
right.
should have the compassion to say, come here, come
We
here.
do that. I don't know
You're
if that's
safe. You're safe. You are loved. We
right,
understand why you're doing this. You're not being judged. You're not being labeled. Because narcissism is a psychological mechanism developed from birth through
developed. Right,
narcissistic parents, narcissistic relationships, pain, hurt, worry, guilt, fear, all of these things that exist within us develop the psychology of narcissism. And
right,
all that person essentially is doing is trying to survive.
right.
Someone who is a narcissist is in such a high level of survival that they're trying to put themselves over everyone. They're trying to push
Exactly.
people lower than them. It's
Right,
like they're drowning and they're trying to keep their head above water.
right,
And with that understanding, we can have such compassion for
right,
anyone who is treating anyone in that way. We can come over and say, you don't need to do that. You
right.
don't need to treat people that way. You can just love. You can just love yourself and love everyone else. And it sounds super cheesy and woohoo, but
But it's
that
so
is,
true.
it's the
Yeah.
truth.
And there's actually there's two other cultures that I've come across at one point. I want to say that one was African and one was Japanese. Don't quote me on that one because I'm not 100% sure, but they have a tradition where anyone that's struggling, that's really stuck in their trauma or, you know, like gotten into addictions or homelessness or whatever, they actually create a community and they stand all holding hands and they put that person in the middle and they just pretty much love that person with so much
They
energy
in
to help
Africa they
them.
sing to them.
Yeah, it's
And
amazing.
in the Africa, you're so right, and it's so beautiful. What happens is when someone's born into that tribe, they're given their birth song,
Right,
and the tribe come to a song, and this is the instrumentation, blah, blah, blah. And every baby that's born is given a birth song. And
right,
then what happens is if they come out of alignment with the tribe, and they start in a way causing some kind of tribal distortion, in terms of like what's in the flow of the tribe and what's best for the tribe, and they're committing crimes or they're treating people badly. They put them in the circle. They all place rings of women first, and then men second, and then they
amazing.
sing their birth song to them
That is
to remind them.
incredible.
To
Oh
remind
my
them, and
God.
apparently, people have massive
Really
alterations in mood, behavior, and emotionality and mental health. By their
amazing.
whole community is singing to them with
Right.
such love that it's so powerful that they completely reform their mental health.
Insane, eh?
Like
So
that should be
beautiful.
like, could you imagine if you go to your doctor in Canada and you're like, hey, I've got a mental problem. They're like, yeah, come this way. And they just pull up your birth song and they're like, yeah, just go.
Right?
And there's like a choir of like 100 sound healers in a room. And
Seriously though.
they put you in a circle and they're all playing bowls, like crystal bowls and didgeridoos and violins
Right?
and guitars. And they just sing to you for half an hour. And then you go back to work. You would just have a completely different life if that
Yeah.
was the mental health,
Yeah.
the way of solving mental health.
Yeah. It's so interesting that there's a lot of different countries out there that do things in different ways that are supportive to the psyche of people, right? Like it's interesting. I mean, I've been working in mental health for the last 22 years and I've watched the way that a lot of stuff that is taking place within that field doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And yet everyone was trained to do it in a certain way and they're doing it. And they'll tell you how much it doesn't work. And they'll tell you how shitty it feels to tell someone, oh yeah, we're going to work on that, knowing it's not happening. There's the whole entire system is broken and we've seen that for so long, and yet it's like, how broken does it have to get before staff members are like, so this doesn't work? Like, we
Right.
need to review policy, we need to review procedures, this isn't working. Like,
Yeah, but it's like it's written by people with mental health problems.
Well, the interesting part is that it's the number one. I've always said and felt this way is that because I was very, very fortunate to have a mother that advocated for me as a person. So when they wanted to label me with a disability and they wanted to tell me that I would never be able to go to college and they wanted to label me with mental health stuff, my mom was very, like, very dedicated to, no, you're going to figure out how she needs to learn. You're going to teach her that way. That's your job, right? I'll do whatever work I need to do at home to teach her to make sure that she's catching up or whatever that looks like. But I'm not about to put her on a bunch of medication, numb her out just so that she can't tell me when her aunt is calling. Like, be like, Mom, pick up the phone. That's another place though to go into in this conversation. There are so many people in the world that experience things that they can't logically or rationally explain. So, for example, Mom, Auntie Kathy's on the phone. No, she's not. The phone hasn't rang yet. A couple minutes goes by, bring, there's Kathy on the phone. My mom's like, so our society has taken the gifts that we have within us, our senses, our feelings, our clairvoyance, our clairaudience, our clairstasians. It has taken the senses that we've had and they've blocked these labels, as in, if you're experiencing any of the sort, you need to get to your doctor. Like, where are the people going, oh, that actually means that you're having an awakening of some sort. Your spirit is actually pushing some stuff out and up for you to actually pay attention to. And excuse me, I think a really big part of this is that because, like you were saying, when you were feeling depression, where else would you go other than to a doctor or a psychiatrist to get that help? And, I mean, right at this point in time, most of the people that are experiencing the mental health issues are way more gifted than ill, but that hasn't been acknowledged. And then B, the mental health system, the number one system that works with the intricacies and intimacies of everything of our human existence, is the only industry that doesn't want to upgrade and update. Like, we get new phones every single month. Like, how have we not been updating human behavior? Like, come on, seriously, how is consciousness not actually like put in there a little bit so that we can normalize our experiences?
It's like the complete denial of consciousness of a self.
100%.
It's in the system's best interest to do that. So it's again a conspiracy theory. But this is what you just touched on. Is I have a friend who is a musical genius.
Okay.
He thinks in terms of Mozart, Beethoven, plays classical music like I've never seen anyone. And when he was at school, he was told that he had ADHD. He was told he was simple. He was taken out of classes and put into a special class. And now we were talking, he's a beautiful philosopher and musician, and we were traveling around Europe last year, and we spent many, many months discussing this. And he says, now he sees why he was taken away from a normal classroom. Because you can't have someone who is a genius, who is thinking philosophically, mathematically, and musically on such a high level, hanging around a bunch of people who are locked into the left hemisphere of their brain.
Exactly.
He is in the creative hemisphere of his brain, and he didn't understand why he was filling out this form, and he didn't really fully understand why he was doing maths at this level, and he didn't really understand the education system. So they pick you up, they call you special, and they put you in a special class of special people, full of special people. And I'll be honest, while I was at school, I always thought that the people in the special class were dumb.
Interesting. I think that's always been, yeah.
I was told that the dyslexic, special needs, or autism, ADHD people were in a foundation class, and we're in the intermediate and higher classes. Gotcha. So we were told it was the other way around. We're the dumb ones following all the fucking rules. And they're the geniuses.
Yeah.
They're the geniuses sitting there thinking, why are we at this school? This doesn't make any sense to us. So they were kept away from us because they didn't want people influencing the classroom of conformity.
Exactly.
Because when you get lots of, in Victorian times, they used to force people to draw and write with their right hand. The reason they did this is because when you use your right side of your body, you're enhancing your left hemisphere of your brain. And the left hemisphere of your brain is your logic brain. It's where you work out stuff. It's where you work stuff out, formulas, mathematics, stuff. When you switch over to your left hand and you start doing with your left hand, you start working on your right hemisphere of your brain, your creative, spiritual side of your brain. the
Right.
philosophical side of your brain. It can ponder the nature of reality. So any left-handed people during Victorian times were beaten. They were hit, they were disciplined, they were put in other classes, and they were forced to use this hand. Because if you're writing lots with this hand, you're locked into your logic brain and you're fucked. You can't think
Interesting.
outside the box.
That's really, really interesting. I remember being in grade 3 or 4 and I broke my arm and I'm a lefty. I'm actually ambidextrous, but I like to write most with my left. That's just comfortable. And at the time, my teacher was like, no, you're going to have to learn how to write with your right hand. I can play like all sports, like everything else happens with my right hand. And yet writing was the dominant. And it was literally like, no, you have to write with your right hand. So like it looks like a kindergarten kid, but I could still do it. Like it's eligible. You could like, I could write you a little note right now and you'd know what it says, like, but it's just not as ebb and flow. So it's interesting to hear that that's why they did that back
Yeah,
then.
I mean, and look, you look at go into just type into Google all of the left-handed geniuses that have ever existed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Einstein, Leonardo da Vinci. You know, you go down the left-handed route, and you
Yeah.
see that all of those people weren't only left-handed; they were vegetarian.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's even more interesting. I'm not even going to get into that conversation at the moment because I could trail off completely different. But I think that that's really interesting. I've definitely my body's been asking me to be a vegetarian since I was little. Like it's weird.
I still eat meat. I went fully vegan for 4 years,
Okay.
and I felt weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker. And as soon as I started eating meat again, my energy picked up again. So
You know,
I know as an Anglo-Saxon white Caucasian male that
right,
I need meat.
right.
Now I
It,
probably have one piece of steak, one piece of chicken, and one piece of fish a week,
okay.
randomly throughout the week, but I'm mostly vegetarian.
I am mostly a vegetarian myself. I eat very little amounts of meat. I've always loved fruits and vegetables. That's kind of always been my jam. But I still eat meat. I literally it just comes from not knowing what else to make. Like not having the brain to like want like I can't tell you how many times I've thought to myself, okay, I'm just gonna go and get some recipes and I print them off and then I go to the grocery store and I get them. And guess what? I don't ever make them. So like every once in a while I will. So it's
Yeah, I mean, bringing nutrition back to mental health
yeah,
is everything is linked. Everything is linked. Like if you're
humongous.
eating meat all the time, I can guarantee you're going to have mental health issues.
Well, not only that, sugar is humongous. Like,
Yeah.
so for example, when you have kids that have autism, or when you have people that have really disturbed mental capacities, a lot of the times they don't eat any fruits and vegetables. It's either that they're eating meat and they're eating potatoes, or they're eating sugar, coffee,
Bread,
900 coffee a
cheese,
day,
bread, cheese, sugar,
chips,
you know,
like just, yeah,
breakfast cereals, all that stuff. And it just perpetuates this sickness, this illness within the body, and if your body is ill, your emotions are turbulent. If your emotions, your mental health is having a difficult time. In
right,
fact, we are what we eat.
right.
I found that when I do a 5-day fast and I just drink water, by the 5th day, I honestly feel like God. There is
Interesting.
no food in me. There is
I
no,
better I better get past that 3 day mark.
yeah. Well, the first 72 hours is brutal, but the 4 and 5 is a cleansing day. And then what I do is on day 5 is I mix up loads of garlic, onions, cilantro, bell peppers, loads, and chop it up really finely so it's in like a big pile. And I
Okay,
cleanse my liver. I do a liver cleanse and I do a kidney cleanse. And then
nice.
I do apple cider vinegar. And while my body is completely empty, I flush my body
Flush
through
it.
with
Awesome.
all of those garlic and herbs and spices and turmeric.
Right.
And then I just go back at eating normally, go and have some pasta, pizza, steak, burgers,
Right.
all the stuff, all the normal stuff. But for those 5 days, every 6 weeks, it's not even a big deal. But look at my skin. My skin's amazing. My health is at the best it's ever been. My mental
Right.
health is amazing. I feel emotionally balanced. And that's just through nutrition, exercise, mental health awareness, meditation, yoga, and knowing that everyone is God.
Right. And that I think that that's a really powerful place to sit, right? Like when you're actually allowing yourself to participate in your own mental, emotional, and energetic well-being, that you get to actually see and feel the results of it a little differently, right?
Yeah.
It's not by default. You don't feel better by accident. The vibe didn't shift in consciousness and bam, you feel good. It's like you literally put in the work to go from feeling not so well to doing things that did make you feel more confident, that did give you more energy, that did actually make you feel good about yourself, that
That's right,
allowed for you to
yeah.
shift that.
The way that's exactly right. And the way I describe it to my clients is, so you exist and you're passively existing. It's a passive happening. You're not actively participating in your life. You're just going through your life unconscious, and you're just like ricocheting from over here, and you're feeling this and you're thinking this and you're muddling your way through your life.
Right.
Other people are actively participating in their own. So
Right.
instead of just being at the mercy of the tide, build yourself a little boat and paddle.
Right.
And I actively participate in my own health.
Right.
I'm not just thinking, oh, I've got bad health. Like, acknowledging that you're unhealthy is great, because it's the first step to change, is acknowledging. But after you've acknowledged that perhaps your mental, emotional, and physical health may not be at the potential, then it's up to you to incrementally improve those three things as you go through your life.
Right.
Now, you don't need to just push a button and suddenly become an enlightened being.
But I think that's what people expect, this
Right.
instantaneous world that we live in.
No, it's literally 10 minutes here, half an hour there,
Right.
5 minutes over here, reading a page of a book,
Right.
going to talk to a therapist, doing some plant medicines,
Right.
doing some meditation, 5 minutes of meditation, not an hour meditation, just 5 minutes of meditation,
Right.
doing some breath work every single day, playing some music that calms you down, talking to a friend, listening to a podcast, but slowly,
Right.
slowly, you're coming out of it. You're becoming more yourself.
We are creating a new synapses in your brain for it to actually be able to, for your neural networks to actually be firing and wiring in the healthy lane of choices and actions, versus that old pattern that it had that was creating the unhappiness, unhealthiness.
Like, by just spending 5 minutes meditating, even if you just sit there thinking for 10 minutes, 5 minutes,
right,
and you're thinking, just sit there for 10 minutes and think. Afterwards, when you stand up and carry on with your day, your body will release a tiny bit of dopamine.
right,
Your body will release that dopamine because at least you sat there for 10 minutes.
right,
Regardless of what happened in the 10 minutes is irrelevant. But you did sit there for 10 minutes. So you actually did achieve something. And as a reward, your body releases dopamine.
right.
So then, even if you just sit there for 10 minutes, you feel good.
Right.
You're like, oh, I feel good. I'm going to do that 10 minutes tomorrow as well.
Right.
And you do it, so your body releases a bit of dopamine. Okay, cool. So you're incrementally adding chemicals into your body. You've got this dopamine receptors that your body feels good that you've achieved something. Little goal setting along the way. You've got the serotonin levels when you're having some kind of enjoyment, or you're in an activity that is entertaining or pleasurable, or eating something, you're eating that thing and oh, this tastes so good. Like, give yourself that present. Give yourself that present of a chocolate cake.
Right.
If you've had a day of progress, go and have that pizza. Like, why not? Why not reward yourself for being awesome?
I think that there's such a catch-22 between what you just said. I do believe that by the way that we're thinking, we're hurting ourselves more than helping ourselves when we go into this process of thinking like, I'm doing really good, I should reward myself. A lot of us only have unhealthy behavior to reward ourselves with because we haven't developed healthy behavior to reward ourselves with yet. I'm guilty. I'm just saying I haven't gotten that in alignment yet. So I think it's interesting because there's some people that you're right. To indulge in eating a pizza at the end of the week because you did have a really great week and that's what you want. I think, all of a sudden that the person goes into eating the pizza and next thing you know, it's like they're thinking in their own brain, oh, my progress from this week is gone because I just ate the pizza. And then they spin in this thought process of judgment towards themselves for the choice. They're not looking at the progress that they just made through that whole time.
That's
now,
right.
I think that some people do that in order to try and keep themselves on track. I think other people do that because we have an awesome self-sabotage mechanism inside of ourselves that if it can kick our ass and make us feel like crap about ourselves, it's going to. Yeah. But I think it's a really big thing it's just about how we see it.
Absolutely.
And again, if we see it as like I have an unhealthy reward system, then that's also another opportunity to go, okay, so then what would be better for you? Is tonight going to be a bath? Like, is that your reward? What is it, right?
Yeah, it's so true, and I understand that. Like if you got very if your mental health hasn't been purified, and you eat that chocolate cake, or you give yourself that pizza, and you're like, oh man, what have I done? I've ruined this week, and blah blah.
Yeah,
What a wonderful opportunity to become aware of that thought process.
exactly.
Like you've eaten the pizza, suddenly your thoughts are sabotaging yourself. You're like, man, I've fucked up. I shouldn't have eaten that pizza. I've been so good all week, and now I'm going to be fat, and I feel bloated, and I shouldn't have had that beer. What a wonderful opportunity to see that your thoughts are toxic.
Right.
Wow, I don't want to think these thoughts. I don't want to think these thoughts. I want to think that I'm the king.
Well, that you
That's
can
what I want to
actually
think. I
enjoy.
want to eat that pizza, and then tomorrow I'm back in the gym. Tomorrow
Right.
I'm back in the gym. Tomorrow I'm back in the gym. And it's about, and it does get easier the more you improve your mental health. It's like mental health is like digging a well. When you first dig a well, you have to go through all of the stone, all of the concrete, all of the dirt, all of the sand, all of the pebbles, all of the rocks, and then you get to the water.
I like
You
that.
have to go through a process of purification of the mind where all of this crap comes up, and you have to, as it comes up, you clear the slate. As it comes up, you clear the
Right.
slate. As you come up, you clear the slate. And it's as it arises, you need to become aware that it's happening, and then accept that it's happening, acknowledge that it's happening, and then ask yourself, what do I want to think?
Right.
And tell your mind, hey, shut up. What are you doing up there?
I do that all
I
the
don't
time.
have
I'm
any
like,
thoughts. I want happy thoughts. I want loving thoughts. I want positive thoughts. I want constructive thoughts. I want thoughts that are uplifting and benefit everyone. Thank you very much.
right.
Over and
Right.
over again, just reconvince yourself.
Faculty, come on, shift. Yeah,
What are you
seriously.
doing up there?
So I have this little thing that I train myself to do. It first came along with training myself in meditation because, as we know, we always hear people say, I don't know how to meditate. Well, when I first started, I didn't know how to meditate either. And let me tell you that my brain used to babble like no other, constant, like it was just running in circles. So I got into this little practice of envisioning, when you go into a mall and at the end of the night they pull a door across the mall thing in order to lock it. So I envisioned a little, like one of those little accordion doors where it's like I'll sit there quietly for a second, that little door will pop open and the babble will start, and I'll be like, no thank you, and I'll just go back. I'll just keep on reprogramming myself to come back to the present.
That
No,
is
thank you.
that is
Or
beautiful.
or the other piece that I've done too is to, if it really won't stop, I actually ask myself, what is going, like I observe, what is this babble about? Is there something of importance that they're trying to get my attention? And now that I'm finally sitting down quiet, they can. Or is this just the script that's running in my head that I don't even know is running there all the time? And now I'm just hearing it, right?
It's a stream. It's a stream of thought, and that technique that you do about the concertina doors, I had something similar, which was I imagined I was at the very beginning of my meditation journey. I would sit there, and I would imagine that all these thoughts were just filling my space, whatever. And then what I would do is I would draw around it and delete it,
Interesting. I love that.
as if I was drawing around something on a computer and just pushing
Right.
delete.
Right.
And I would just literally draw a circle around it and delete it. And what I was left with was black space, as
Right.
if I was looking out into space.
Right.
And it was like this thing, and I would just delete it, and I would just allow this thing over and over again to just completely evaporate. And eventually
Amazing.
the mind gets slower and slower and slower until there is no babble.
Right. I literally was like, hello, he's still working in there.
I'm very super aware now. If a thought comes in, a judgment comes in against someone, or
Yep.
I look at someone and I come to some kind of conclusion or judgment, or I categorize them in some way, and
Yep.
it comes up, I'm like, whoa, like,
Right.
no, 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 come on. And I definitely
Right.
don't voice it, and I definitely don't act it.
Right.
I just
Right.
become super aware, and
Yep.
then I try and reverse it. What I do is, if it's detrimental, if there's a thought that's detrimental to someone or judging them in some way, I quickly flip it and I say, "Wow, what a wonderful person that person is! I love them so much.
Right.
They're so beautiful. What a wonderful soul, and their physical, mental, and mental bodies are so wonderful, and I can't wait to. They're so beautiful." And I just talk really positively about them for a few minutes, just to
Right.
remind the mind that this is my train of thought. This is how
Right.
I actually want to be thinking all the time.
Right.
And anyone that's watching this who's known me for the first 30 years of my life will just think I am a completely different person to who I was 30 years, 20 years.
Interesting.
I was a
Right.
complete asshole.
Were you?
And
Yeah.
when I was 30, enough was enough. I
Interesting.
was like, I need to do something about this.
What?
Otherwise, I'm going to have no friends, no family, no money, no nothing. I was actually taking a lot of drugs. I was drinking a lot. I was
I was
getting
gonna
into,
say, what was that point for you? Yeah. Do you mind sharing a little bit about like what got you to that breaking point?
yeah, it's something really, really significant. I was living in London. I was married to a woman, my first wife, and we were great jobs, really good paying jobs, nice car, nice apartment by the river. We lived on the River Thames, like right in the central London. It was all
Wow.
going swimmingly well
Right.
in the eyes of society. And you guys, Chris, you're good at your job, and Laura is a beautiful woman, and it was all just looking rosy. And I was on the way to work and I didn't put a coat on and I was cycling to work because I cycled and it started raining and it started raining. And as I got closer and closer to work, I got wetter and wetter and wetter until I was just drenched.
Right.
And I had a significant switch in my mind where I just had a breakdown.
Okay.
And I was just crying on the bike, thinking, fuck, I don't want to be at work all day soaking wet. And my job was quite stressful. I was a business manager. And I just started crying.
Right.
And I was heavily judging myself for crying. Like I was so ashamed of myself. I was so unaware of myself at that time that got off the bike, quickly sat on a step at Bank Station in London, and I just put my head in my hands and I sat crying, just allowing the process to go through. But one thing that pissed me off is that hundreds of people walking past never asked me if anything was okay.
Right.
And I was looking, and there was people looking at me, and I'm in tears in a suit
Right.
with my bike, and not one person in London asked me if I was okay. And
Sounds.
I'm talking hundreds of people walking to work.
Mhm.
And I was like, fuck this. So I went home. I didn't go to work and I got back into bed. And that was the defining moment of my mental health change because I left my job, I left my wife, and I left London in 2 weeks.
Wow.
And that was it. I remember I put all my stuff in the car. I drove and I left and I drove down to Dorset in England. And as I was driving, I was listening to a Coldplay album. And I was just like, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm literally just gonna go with it. I don't know what.
Please, please, please.
Yeah,
Make
it was like
this. Yeah.
it was a moment where I thought, well, it can't be worse than what I've been doing.
Right.
Nothing is going to be worse than working in London, some crap job with a wife that doesn't. We were really good friends, me and my wife, but it wasn't a husband and wife. It was more like friends.
Okay.
And I wanted intimacy. I wanted love. I wanted connection. I wanted to go traveling. I really want.
Partnership. Yeah.
My soul was like, you need to get out of London, dude. Like it's time to leave.
Right. Right.
And since that moment, I've been following this
That's
and not
amazing.
this.
Right.
I've been following this and I've been literally tapping into my intuition, tapping into my heart. What do I want to do today? What does my heart want to do? How do I want to serve humanity? How do I want to help people? And as soon as I switched over to service instead of self-service, but service to others, and I'm still perfecting it. I'm still figuring out how I'm going to do that, and I'm still
Right.
very young. So I know my 40s, 50s, and 60s will be very beneficial for a lot of people,
Right.
including myself.
Well, I
But
mean, and even just a added contribution to that is that even now, like, it's one of those things that often we think like, well, I don't know what direction I want to go in or how I'm going to be of service. But, I think that this is one of those big things just by being yourself. You having conversations with people, whether that's on a one-on-one scale, whether that's, talking to a couple people on a live, whether that's whatever that looks like. I mean, you're constantly adding and contributing to the consciousness of but just by choices, actions, and thoughts and belief systems that you engage in, right?
yep, every shopkeeper, every person at the checkout, every bus driver, every person, every bin man,
Oh
doesn't
my
matter who it
god.
is. Yeah, it doesn't. You don't need to go into the world to become Tony Robbins. Although Tony Robbins is helping millions of people, he's an amazing guy.
For
But
sure.
not everyone is Tony Robbins. Sometimes you can have a spiritual awakening and just carry on doing your job,
Right.
helping and serving 12 people every day.
I
You're yeah,
yeah, well, like, so when I was working in mental health, my spiritual awakening, I mean, I've been going through many layers of my own process over time, but my spiritual awakening had started back when my father had passed away and I was 10 years old. And I was already experiencing some quite weird energetic stuff that at a little age I didn't understand. I do now. Um, But I think that a big part of things was that I was really grateful that I had a mother that made sure, like, okay, I don't know what to do here. I don't know how to help you guys. I just lost my husband. You guys just lost your father. We as a family dynamic have someone out of there. Let's go and talk. So my mom was all about communication. I'm so fortunate that it was about allowing ourselves to pay attention, observe our own journey. It wasn't about like, well, no, you have to do what I say because this is my journey. You're my kids, right? So I'm really fortunate in that way. But I think that a really big piece of coming into understanding of things was that I moved to Toronto to go and see how they help our fellow human beings that are struggling. And my heart broke. First of
Mm,
all, Toronto is like 10 times bigger than my hometown. And you see homeless people everywhere or people on the street everywhere. Mental health is everywhere there. And I just have such a passion for people that instead of like steering away from it, I legit like walk up to anyone and be like, hey, are you willing to sit down and have a chat?
yeah,
And they'd be like,
let's
you
talk
want
about
to
some
talk
stuff.
to me? And I'd be like, yeah, let's talk. Like share with me how your experience is. So a big part of my own process of being able to play with my own mental health or offer what I had been taught at a really young age was to see humanity all as the opportunity of we just need to be educated. And if we're educated about how our spacesuit functions, then we can have a little bit more of a relatable aspect to each other. So for example, all of those people that I always had this thing. I wouldn't just give money to someone. I'd say to them, do you have time to go have a meal? And I'd ask them, will you share your story with me? And then we'd go and we'd sit down, we'd have a meal, they'd share their story, they'd get out of the cold, then we'd move along our day. And a big part of that was that I had recognized that people had been taught to think or feel about themselves in a certain way. And it not removes, but it's often advocated for that we forget about people like that. And my heart was so filled with love to just know, like, all right, even no matter how crazy you are, you're a really cool soul. So tell me about your soul, and then you can tell me about your crazy, like
Right.
it was kind of
Right.
like I always saw people, like I see you kind of deal,
Yeah,
right?
I talked to all the homeless people in Bournemouth in the hometown I lived in for years, and I on the way home from work, instead of catching a bus, I would just walk through the gardens, and there's like people drinking whiskey, and there's like people getting into fights and looking for
Yep.
drugs and just getting all. And I decided that I was going to invite every single homeless person I found back to my house for dinner,
Wow.
and not one of them took the opportunity.
Right.
And some guy walks up to them, is like, "Hey, what's up? I'm wearing a shirt and I'm dressed nice and I'm clean shaven." And I get talking to them, "What's your name?" And I was like, "Hey, do you want to? I'm going to cook some dinner and you can come back and have a bath and have a shave and clean yourself up." Not one of the homeless people accepted it
Crazy.
because they're hardwired to not trust people.
Yeah, of course.
They're kind of looking at me like, "No, no, 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 no,
What are
no."
you gonna do to me once I
Yeah,
get
yeah,
there?
yeah. This sounds too good to be true.
Right.
And I tried to do it with as much humility and compassion as I could. And I thought, well, okay. And they're like, just give me some money. And I was like, well, I'm not going to give you some money. I'll cook you a meal and I'll give you a warm clothes and a sleeping bag if you want. And I realized after like asking 37 people whether they wanted to have dinner that not one of them wanted to get off the streets.
Wow.
And that mental and emotional patterning that is reinforcing their sense of lack and identity is keeping them in poverty. So even when it's handed to them on a silver platter, hey, come to my house, have something warm to eat, and they're hardwired to distrust. Like
It's
they
very
sleep on the streets. Like,
it's true. Yeah, it's so true. And like I've been working with this organization for the last 5 years and probably longer than that actually. It was like 2014. And one of the things was that going out monthly to feed the homeless and to interact with the homeless.
yeah,
And it's unbelievable how many people that are on the street that are they will not take more than what they need. There's a lot that people will be greedy. Yeah, there is. But for the most part, anyone that's in a really tough position, like they will only take what they need and they don't want any more. They don't want, but again, you have to remember that that also comes, we're all brainwashed through the programming, the conditioning that we've received since the time that we've been born. And a big part of that is that when you come the abandonment and the neglect that comes with people offering you things, it's almost like there's nothing that someone can offer you that's enough from the hurt and the pain that actually took place,
Yeah,
right?
that's
So
right.
there is a mentality of like, I'm not deserving or worthy of that. Like, we brought a bunch of people to get haircuts at a barber shop. My heart was like melting, them crying as they're like getting their head shaved or like getting their hair done, or like the makeup being put on them, like the joy, the feeling of like, I got pampered today. It was just honestly the most beautiful
It's
thing.
self-worth, it's worth. They're giving
Yeah,
you, adding value to them. And I suppose every human being has a different level of where they stand in relation to how much they earn. Some people, like even myself, have battled with that for years. I was a minimum wage worker. Like
right,
I started off as a KP as a child, and then I moved into chefing, and then my chefing moved into waitering, and waitering turned into a bar, and then turned into assistant manager, and then I became a general manager. And so I've always worked that's just the nature of me. I think I've always just been on a slow incline to reach my potential.
right,
Even now, after this 8 to 10 years I've had, I'm just slowly incremental. But now I'm realizing that I'm £50 an hour, or I'm £120 an hour,
right,
or I don't need to go and work a job. And if I do have little jobs to do and help businesses, but I used to think that £9.50 an hour was an amazing wage. Like I'd be like, wow, I got paid £9.50 an hour. It's amazing. But
yeah,
slowly I've just learned that I'm a priceless being.
right,
I have value to add things, and I don't take things that don't add value to me.
right.
And that has been a very long 10 years. And people who are homeless are at the very end of that scale. They literally have no self-worth, no self-esteem, and they've ended up on the streets drinking. And they're all lovely people.
I
I
think that
will add.
it's really cool that you just said it that way, because I think that you're right. And it's almost like the next incremental part of, let's say, mental health, though. For example, whether you're on the streets and you're drinking and you're doing whatever, and you're in this state of homelessness, or whether or not it's that next level, you know how we were talking about that sliding scale, right? Like the worth, like lack of worth or lack of value that comes with the person that seeks the mental health label to feel like they are finally seen and heard, and their worth or value is now put into the label of
Mm,
that experience, versus, like you said, being able to identify and recognize, okay, I'm just moving myself up in my own life, working towards my highest potential. You find your worth and your value through that, through the people that aren't doing the work, that are only hoping that the medication will help sort things out. That's a part that they're missing. That's a key element that's being missed right there. And it's heartbreaking, because then you go to talk to people about it and it's like, they're so insulted that you're asking about the accountability, or that you're providing them with taking back their own accountability so that they can actually improve that area of their mental
yeah,
health,
it's so
right?
true. And now we're on the homelessness topic. It's like some homeless people have just found themselves in a situation where they've moved out of a family home, and the wife took the house, and they've got no family members, and they're just like regular normal people of society, and they've just literally fallen out in their industry, and they're not
Absolutely.
drinking, and they're not doing drugs,
Yep.
and they could be sitting reading a book.
Yep.
I found that most generally homeless people are really nice people, and I have never come across. Maybe a couple of them have just told me to f off, and had a bit of a drug situation. But generally, I have really lovely chats with homeless people.
Me too.
But they are
God, yes.
still unwilling themselves to take responsibility for their own life and to step into a place, even if it's offered to them.
Right.
Even if you come over with a silver platter and say, some of them just will not accept it, because they've accepted that their self-image, who they think they are, is this person.
Yeah. And that
They're
they're not worth
identifying
that, and
they're
that
not
they're
worth
not
it.
worth it.
My dad didn't show up for me, or my mum called me a blah blah blah, and my teacher always said I was a nothing, and my brother always said I was a good for nothing idiot. And they believed all of these stories, and now they're drinking whiskey in the city centre.
Right.
And all of those are just stories. They're actually an infinite being with unlimited potential, and with the power of God inside them, with
Right.
unconditional love that can express it at any time. But because of this mental and emotional patterning that's so thick
Right.
and so rigid, they've literally placed themselves into this little box: I am a homeless person.
Right. Yeah.
And our job as mental health professionals is to pop people's little bubbles
Right.
so they can remember, wow, I'm an infinite being. I'm not who I thought I was. I'm not
Right.
who I thought the feeling was. The feelings that we have isn't what we are.
Right.
And that is profound for people because they're like, no, but I feel this way. How dare you tell me that I'm not me because I feel this way. And you're like, yes, you do feel that way. But just because you're feeling it doesn't mean you are it.
Right. Same with
This,
behavior. Yeah, same with behavior. Like it really breaks my heart
yeah,
that we're set on a societal structure, for example, for anyone that has addiction issues. You go into NA or you go into AA, and they literally are just re-solidifying, I'm an addict. Hi, my name's so and so. I'm an addict. And literally just reprogramming the brain to continuously acknowledge the addict. Well, that's a part of behavior. The addiction is a behavior aspect, and you are not your behavior. So why are you identifying constantly with being an addict? It's
yeah,
mind blowing that it's 2022 and this is where we're still at,
yeah,
right?
it's so
Like,
true. And I think having an acknowledgement that you may have a drug addiction is
yep,
huge. It's huge. Like
absolutely,
I
100%.
had it, I've had it many times with different substances, and I was like, this is out of control. Like this thing has taken control of me.
Right,
But at no point would I repeat the phrase "I am an addict"
right,
because I understand the power of identity and words, how they
right.
create reality. Anyone saying that I am a drug addict or should just be super careful about what they're doing because you're forming beliefs. You're
Well,
forming.
it's the belief system, but I think that a lot of people don't recognize how our belief systems are actually created. And at one point in time, I was listening to Abraham Hicks, and there was a really simple and easy statement that was, beliefs are a thought that we keep on thinking,
Yeah,
and we think them until we believe them. So if you do not like your beliefs or the thoughts that you're having,
yeah,
keep thinking other thoughts over and over
over and
until
over
that
and over
other
again.
one isn't prominent.
Yeah, the way that Bentino describes it is like this. This is your thoughts. These are the thoughts. They're thin. They're just hanging out in your head. They're doing a thing.
Right.
And as they repeat themselves, what happens to them? They get
Solidifying the
thicker.
pathway. Yep.
They get thicker. And the thicker they get, the harder it is to delete them.
Yep.
So this thought here that's been going on inside my head for 30 years has now solidified itself into what we call a belief system.
Yep.
Once the belief system is so solidified, it becomes an assumption.
Right.
It's so deep as a belief structure that we just automatically assume it.
Right.
It's so before beliefs that it's an assumption. For
Mhm.
instance, the assumption that we're human beings is an assumption.
Right.
We look out of our eyes, we look into the mirror, we see a physical vessel, and we assume that we are that.
Right.
That is one of the largest assumptions that exist on this planet. Is
Right.
nothing, the assumption that you are this thing, that you feel, and it moves and you can taste things and your senses are what you are. That is an assumption because when you have transcendental states of meditation and you transcend physical reality, you exist before physical reality. You exist way, 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 way before the physical body tastes and smells anything.
Right.
So this is literally an avatar that we're experiencing. And the assumption, it drops down into an assumption. And then we have presumptions, which is pre-assumptions. Now, this is the mind. The mind is incredibly intelligent. It is so intelligent. So all of those thoughts are just surface things. You have to get through your beliefs, your assumptions, and your presumptions before you're completely free to choose what it is you want to think. If you want to think positive, loving, happy, charismatic, joyful, amazing thoughts, and you want that stream of thoughts coming into your head, you've got to start looking at your beliefs and assumptions because you have an automatic assumption that you're worthless. You have a belief that you're not worth anything or that people are going to attack you or that you're not safe. And I just said it, so I'll just go into it. Safety, I think we talked about this the other day. Safety is the foundation of mental health.
Right.
If you can convince yourself that you are safe as a primary belief, I am safe, you'll find that your entire psychophysical organism, your mind and your body will relax.
Right.
In doing so, your central nervous system relaxes, your muscles relax, your breathing regulates, and your mental health starts to calm down. I am safe. because when we are being pulled out of our mothers by the doctor, we don't know what's happening.
Right.
And we get hung upside down and hit by a doctor and we're crying and there's all these lights going on. And we are at that point forming belief structures that will affect us for the rest of our life.
Right.
And then we go home and your dad might be a little bit heavy with you while he's changing your diaper. And your cousin might hit you when you're like 1 year old and you get hit on the head. All of those things are forming the belief that you're not safe.
Or you're in your crib crying and they just leave you there to fall
no one
asleep
comes to
instead
you.
of cuddle you.
Yeah. You've been crying for 20 minutes, your mum's been on the phone, and your dad's at work. So you're crying for 20 minutes.
Yep.
You're forming the belief that you're not worth anything.
Yep.
I am not worthy of people paying attention to me.
Yep.
And that stays with you for the entirety of your life.
Mm-hmm.
And it's up to us. We are born to expand. We're born to improve. We're born to reach our potential. But for some reason, humanity comes to a plateau. And most people are living in a state of plateau where they don't know that they're doing it. They've just created their beliefs and assumptions and their thoughts, and they're living out their lives just accepting that this is reality. This is my life, blah, blah, blah. And we have to crack that shell in order for people to snap out of that and begin the ascent up into their potential.
And for them to also I love the way that you said that, by the way, thank you. Because I think that the other piece is that for the recognition that we're all going through this. We literally, like, I can't say to you, hey, Chris, I've got a lot of these awesome techniques that you could use. If you don't use them, no one can help you, legit. Like, if you choose that you're not going to do anything for your own mental health, no matter how hurt you are, no matter how miserable you are, no matter how painstaking it is for me to watch that state of circumstance, if that person's not willing to do it. And this is the interesting part. This is where the relatability factor, it's all ourselves that have to do this for ourselves. That's right. So this is where we really could, as a humanity and as a society, remind each other how to work through all of these different things and how to navigate all this, to recognize that we are all doing it. It doesn't have to be something that we're hiding from or denying ourselves of anymore at this point. We don't need to be miserable anymore at this point in our world. There's so much information that can actually help us remember how to relate with each other and actually do this work, that it becomes one of those things that when people say, well, you know, I tried it, I can't do it. Well, you got to try again. You got to try again. You got to try again, you know?
Yeah, it's like playing the guitar. I teach people to play the guitar, and within a year they've stopped because their fingers hurt and they didn't get progress or whatever. And if you really want to learn a musical instrument, you never stop.
But it's the same for our technological spacesuit and the brain that we have and the energy centers that we have. And I do think that a big misconception about mental health comes in because we don't, on a norm, not everybody is aware of how the technological spacesuit actually works. And so we've been walking through this world, experiencing these thoughts, these emotions. We've been having a physical experience because our bodies are here. And yet most of us have no clue how the technology in our body actually works. We don't even know what systems are within our bodies, whether that's the nervous system, that, you know, circulatory system, whether that's the parasympathetic. Like, there's so many different things that the body is doing and functioning on, and we were never taught a foundation of that. So we actually think that we're at the mercy of the body, at the mercy of human experience. And yet, you know, unfortunately, they've kept all these different industries, we're going to call them, because that's just a better way to say it. They've kept them all so siloed. So you got healthcare over here, you got mental health over here, you got physical, like, there's so many different things, and none of them are amalgamated enough where you go on an overall view. This is the mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, behavior, and social way that a human being actually functions. This is the technology and the systems within them that work this way in order for you to be able to move yourself from being stuck into being in a great place.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, I would say the way you just said it exactly right, which is like you have the one stream, which is spirituality, and spirituality, or the spirit or soul, breaks into the four elements of human experience: mental, emotional, physical, and sexual.
Right.
And these four elements are pulling us in the human experience. One thing that is completely steady during the experience is the spiritual experience. The knowingness, the isness, the awareness, consciousness itself is so still, so perfect, so loving, that it almost is entertained by this human experience. It's like the
Right.
soul, we talked about the other day, the soul is sunbathing, and the
Right.
human experience is happening down here, and we're feeling things. And it's right, that integration in the future, healthcare will be an acknowledgement of all the areas of our life in a diagram where it's easy to understand that these four elements are us.
Right.
We are sexual energy. We are emotional energy. We are mental energy. We are physical bodies.
Right.
And the physical body is, I would say, a physical representation of the other three.
Right.
So the other three are energetic. Sexual energy is energetic. Emotions are energetic. And mind is energetic. So three of them are made of energy, and the other one is made of physicality. And
That
mind.
actually sounded so hollow.
I
I was like, shit, was that actually just his head? Like,
I tapped the table.
okay.
That's hilarious. The train of thought. Okay, yeah, cool. So the it's mind over matter. You've heard that comment, mind over matter.
Right.
The reason mind exists over matter because energetically it's higher in frequency than physical reality. Physical reality is very dense in terms of its manifestation is condensed into physical reality.
Right.
But if you get your mind right and you align your thought processes, your beliefs and assumptions, and you recondition your thought processes, your physical body will change appearance.
Will change. Right.
Everything, your skin, your systems, your organs, your
Right.
eyesight, your taste buds, everything will start enhancing. You actually
Yeah.
become a superhuman if you get your mind right. The
Right.
mind is the primary, the universal mind. It's the universal connected mind. Your mind and my mind are the same mind.
Right.
It's the same mind. We have different fields within that mind. You have Victoria's field, I have Chris's field, but
Right.
mind in and of itself is like a Wi-Fi signal that exists in the entire universe that
Right.
our brains connect to.
Right.
So we can call upon wisdom and understanding and knowledge and higher realms of understanding if we know that that's possible. Like when I pray and meditate, I'm asking for wisdom, understanding, knowledge, truth, all of the patience, all of the virtues. Ask
Right.
grace, patience, all of these things are energetic virtues that we can ask for. Ask and thou shalt receive. This is just the way that human beings operate. And if you don't know that you can do that, you may live your life according to what you've been told
Right.
about who you think you are. My mission is to snap everyone out of all of these bubbles so we can create a utopian society and live in peace.
That, yeah, where we actually care about each other, love each other, have the
Yeah,
oneness of things, harmony is actually there. We actually care about our people
yeah,
on a large level versus just whatever little human world we've been taught to look at, right?
yeah. And what is it that's driving you and I to meet on Zoom and have this conversation? It's love for other
Right.
people. Because
Right.
I could live the rest of my life not speaking about this ever and live a really nice, happy life.
Yeah, for sure.
But if I can share this knowledge and whoever's watching this, if we can share this information and then you are changed and then you move into your power and you share it with the next person and the next person, slowly the ricochet, it just starts spreading,
The
spreading,
ripples,
spreading, spreading, the
for
ripple
sure.
effect. So
Yeah, for sure.
my calling is to be an educator. And I will just continue chipping away at that until I die, until I'm not here anymore.
Right.
Whatever that looks like. There's no rush. There's no rush to anyone's life. You don't need to improve your mental health if you don't want to.
Right.
This is a very zoomed out perspective, but whether you do improve your mental health or you don't, it doesn't actually technically matter.
Well, and it's just about your own journey, how you
Whatever you
experience
want
your
to
own
do.
journey, right?
That's right.
I often say to my clients that when we're experiencing having really um, a really reactionary emotional response in our body to something, that usually a part of that is because our soul actually sees it in a certain way and our brains are so focused on seeing it in our own ego way that it creates a disruption in that field, and we start really getting into the feeling of, like, whether that's anger, whether that's jealousy, whether that's fear, whatever that looks like. And I often talk about, being able to shift those perspectives and find the alignment with one that actually feels better, because if you're putting on a new perspective that feels better and your body is responding, you are getting more in alignment with your soul perspective of the situation versus the ego that's playing out that emotion, right?
Yeah, that's completely right. And I look at it like the emotional guidance system.
Right.
The emotional guidance system is your emotions are guiding you to where your thinking is out of alignment.
Right.
So if you have an emotion that is unpleasant, we don't label emotions good and bad emotions. We
Right.
just have pleasant emotions and we have unpleasant emotions. Let's be honest, guilt, shame, frustration are not pleasant experiences. They cause us to be out of alignment. So I would recommend to everyone is that when you're having an emotion that isn't joy, love, peace, happiness, and ecstatic bliss, you could have your thinking maybe out of alignment in some way. And your emotions are guiding you to where your thinking is out of alignment. So
Right.
whenever you feel something that is causing you an anxiety or frustration, ask yourself, where is my thinking out of alignment right now?
Right.
How could I see this situation? How could I? And just ask your mind a question. Ask your mind the question, it will answer you.
Yeah.
Where is my thinking out of alignment right now? Why am I feeling this way? Just wait for the answer. You'll say, oh, because you think that you're a piece of shit.
Right.
And your dad, and the reason for that is because your dad called you a piece of shit your whole life.
Right.
Wow, I'm not. So what am I? You're amazing. You're a beautiful soul having a wonderful experience. Wow, I am a beautiful soul having a wonderful experience. Wow, and that emotion will correct itself.
Right.
Now,
Exactly.
the more you correct that emotion, it will release at some point.
Right.
The emotional charge that's in your emotional field, at some point, if that belief has finally solidified itself as a new structure, that emotion will release itself. And that energetic release we call crying or wailing or purging. That is a completely organic and healthy process that everyone needs to come to terms with. Crying is one of the most beneficial things you could
Right. It
possibly
is.
learn to do in your entire life.
It really is.
It's like turning on a sprinkler system, letting off steam, cry, let it all come out of you. Let your t-shirt get really wet. And men in particular struggle with this because when I first started my spiritual journey, whenever I'd feel like I was going to cry, my mind would immediately stop it.
Of course. Yeah.
I'd immediately think, who's here? Who's going to watch this? My wife's here. There's a man over there. There's a guy on the bus. Okay, stop. You can't cry in front of anyone because it
Right.
makes you look weak. It makes you look like you're a weakling. And if you're weak in a society, then you're going to die.
Right.
So in a way, the mind is trying to keep you alive by stopping you from crying. And as soon as that thing comes up, just ignore it. Keep the feeling, keep the feeling. And then just let it all out. And just really express it, really express it. And afterwards, you get given a gift, the gift of joy.
Right.
Crying equals joy. If people need to understand this formula, crying equals joy.
Right.
This is a formula. And the more I cry, this is the result. The
Right.
result of crying. And I would love to do a whole thing on crying because it is
You should, honestly, especially being a man, but especially being a man talking about crying. I think that that's so powerful. We've really lost roots with the humanity of things and the relatability. I mean, think about for how many decades, centuries, uh, it's been a whole thing about men having to be strong. And I hate words like like pull up your man pants, or like there's such a connotation around men about emotions. And thank God we've been watching that change a lot over the last 5-10 years, with like actual groups coming in where men are doing groups together, they're allowing their emotions to come up and out, they're expressing themselves healthy. But that would definitely be an amazing conversation to
Yeah,
bring
I
to the
mean,
forefront.
it's funny because the more you cry, the less you need to.
Yeah,
The
seriously.
paradox of crying. The more you cry, the less you need to cry. It's like you're filled full of steam, and crying is just letting off that steam.
Right.
And eventually, there's no steam. There's no emotional charge. So even if you are encountering something that could be considered sad, you still feel sadness. You still feel. You might even your eyes may even need to start, but you're not crying. You're weeping.
Yeah.
There's difference. I have moments where I'm watching a film and I just start. I'm not like weeping out of like some kind of like emotion. I'm just allowing my eyes to have a leak, leaking eyes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
you
for
just
sure.
wipe them. You wipe them. You're happy that you're feeling. You're happy that you're
Exactly.
feeling. It feels so good to feel,
To feel. Yeah.
to feel it. And men are locked in their logic brain, and sadly, that is a key and a lock to their feelings.
Right.
And I'm not generalizing men, because there are some really beautiful, powerful men on this planet who have done all of the work, or maybe they were even raised that way or even born that way, and
Right.
they just know their true power. They haven't had to go through the process of purifying themselves. They just are amazing people, and they feel deeply, they think intelligently, and they're living their lives according to their own truth.
Right.
But our job is to focus on the other side of society, which are suffering, who are having mental problems, who are having relationship breakdowns. And what we can do as educators and as healers to lift up humanity, to lift them up, to get everyone to remind themselves of their beauty. Um, and even talking to you, sometimes you'll say something, and I'm like, oh yeah, just being reminded of something.
I do that too, though, for sure, when I'm talking to you. But I think that that's a beautiful part about the way that our souls experience life and the way that we're open to listening
Mm,
when we're speaking with each other, right?
yeah.
We don't listen with I need to respond to you. We actually are present in the moment of hearing each other speak. So when it's like, oh, there, that was something. There's an area, like.
Yeah, and the more dialogues I have with people like yourself, and I've started doing a lot more podcasts and radio interviews and stuff, I always leave that thinking, wow, I expanded myself today.
Right.
Because sometimes questions are asked and you don't know the answer to a question until someone's asked you it. You
Exactly.
don't even know where that information is coming from. Like, I don't know anything.
Yeah.
I don't know anything. It's just that free flowing dialogue, and it's just coming through my mouth. And sometimes I'll say something, I'm like, man, I had no clue that I knew that. I
Seriously,
don't even
I
remember
love
learning that.
that. Yeah,
I
seriously.
don't even remember learning that information, but there is an Akashic records. There is a group of mental thoughts and knowledge from history and going ancient times, and it all exists in the mind. And we, as conscious beings, can tap into that knowledge and be channels for knowledge and wisdom to come through.
Right.
I didn't know that was possible for me 10 years ago, but it's definitely the direction I'm moving into. And the
I
more,
I
okay.
can really, yeah, I really, really appreciate that you just said that, to be honest, because here's two things. One of them is that there's a lot of people that aren't aware that they have that capability, that they can just channel information, that they can tap into things. And I think that that's a big piece about the industry of mental health, is that, they're, instead of looking at what those gifts are and how to actually harness them and utilize them in a way that does make them healthy and does bring up their superpowers and does bring up the superhuman aspect, kind of goes back to what you were saying a little while ago about, not to get into conspiracy theories, but, the world would look very different if we were just all conscientious beings that were living our best life, right? That we would have that harmony that we were speaking of, that unity that we were speaking of, that love would be natural to us to share with each other and to, ripple across the world. But I think that a big misconception, though, becomes that if you're not spiritual, or if you haven't been doing the work for a long time, that you can't get to that place and actually have those experiences. And like, I feel like that's a little bit of a ripoff. Now, unfortunately, in the mental health system, they do, a lot of the labels do start with, if you feel like you're chosen from God to come and do a mission, which puts people into a box right away. I've been saying since the day I got here on purpose, like,
Right.
um,
Every soul's here deliberately.
well, and I've always felt like I'm aware I'm here on purpose. I'm aware I'm here for the experience. I feel like I definitely have been here helping shift consciousness for however long, and I'll continue doing that my whole time on the planet. And I feel like there's a lot of people that knew that they were here, that they were special, that they had something, whatever that ability was. And then while going to look for help, were navigated away from harnessing that power.
Yeah.
And now almost feel like there's something wrong with, actually, it would almost like be looking at it like witchery, right?
Yeah.
How almost this thing of like, oh, those are the people like who are doing weird things. No, all we're literally doing is letting the technology use its spacesuit the way it knows how.
It's like
Like,
just getting out of your own way.
right.
Because
Because
your body wants to do, your body, your mind and emotions, they want to function.
right,
You just have to
exactly.
you just have to allow it. In a way, you just have to sit and breathe and allow your mental health to improve itself. But you can actively participate in the reprogramming of your own mind.
Right. I had done when you were just talking about the mind intelligence field, I did it was the gentleman that you had shown me, Benito.
Oh, Bentino Massaro.
Bentino, yeah. So yesterday I actually did his light body meditation.
Yeah, well, he's got the
And
head. Yeah.
yeah, so it was beautiful because I've went into many of different meditations, but not necessarily in a guided way where you're actually bringing those energy bodies, like you're merging them and experiencing the individual fields and what they bring, but then also what it feels like once they're actually merged. Man, when the mind intelligence and like the colors of the blues started actually like interacting, it was literally like there was not there was no information in the world that I didn't have access to if I chose to focus myself in one area or topic that I wanted. And it was so interesting that I actually had to consciously be like, no, okay, you could do that later. Let's get like stay here, stay present, right?
Right.
Because it's easy to want to distract yourself, right?
That's right.
It's easy to be like, oh, let's explore that. What's there?
Yeah,
Whatever
yeah,
that looks
the
like.
physical mind is hardwired for physical reality. And when you
Right,
have transcendental experiences, the physical mind doesn't want to leave physical reality.
right,
So what we call thinking or the stream of thought is just your physical mind interpreting and coming to conclusions and describing physical reality in terms of labels, descriptions, conclusions, stuff like that.
right,
And it's so easy when you go into those meditative states that you come up with an amazing idea. The mind releases an amazing idea, or you receive an amazing idea, and
right,
suddenly you're in the kitchen and you're like, hold on a second, 5 minutes ago I was in a meditation and now I'm doing the dishes. Like,
right,
what the hell is that about? So then you go sit down again and you sit down. But the physical
right.
mind wants to keep you in physical reality.
Excuse me.
And like Alan Watts says, and which is I love, the mind is
Alan
like
Watts is amazing.
the mind is like a muddy pool of water.
Right,
When you leave it alone, it naturally settles itself. And this is just a nice way of looking at it. Like, you don't need to do anything to the mind just for now. In order to become self-aware of the mind, you just have to do nothing to it.
right.
Just allow it to think and watch it thinking and watch it thinking and watch it thinking, and eventually it stops.
It stops.
It does stop. It does eventually get to the point, and not in a helpful way, because sometimes I
You
can
need
be
the thinking.
right. Well, sometimes I have whole days where nothing gets done
Right,
because I'm just spaced out. I'm literally walking around like, wow, I live
right,
on I live on a planet.
right. I do the same thing at times.
Wow. And I'm just like, I'm so in awe with reality. I'm so amazed. I look at my hands and I'm like, wow, I've got hands.
Right,
It's amazing. Look at these hands. And you're just in awe. So that's not always helpful. Like, sometimes I need to be like, no, I need to think. I pick up a book and I'll read a bunch of words in a book just to get the mind pumping again. Like,
right, right,
do something that's mentally stimulating, because the mind is a very beneficial tool. It's a vehicle through which we are interpreting physical reality.
right.
I can be in a meditative state with no thoughts quite easily for a couple of hours, but I do enjoy the process of thinking.
Right. That is one of the things that because my whole thought process really shifted last summer. Not the summer that just passed, actually, the one before that, was when I realized that me doing this whole closing of the door over and over and over had actually trained my brain to go into another pathway. And because I wasn't receiving that babble, I literally was going through this thing of like, did something happen to my brain? Like, why aren't you thinking? And like you said, I'd have to go and read, or I'd have to go and, create, do something that would bring the inspiration back to actually have the thought, to actually be able to create, right? But I do think that there's something super important about what you said. And I just want to recap on it because you've actually mentioned it twice now in this conversation. And a part of that is our brains are like antennas that are receiving thoughts. A lot of people, when they have a thought, they assume that it's the internal brain faculty that is producing and giving that thought. So there's an identification that comes with having the thought coming through us entertaining that thought. Abraham Hicks always says you got 17 seconds. If it's not the thought you want, shift it. But anyways, we'll go into that after. So a big part of it though is that we tend to have thoughts that are associated, we pick up on thoughts that are associated to the past pains and hurts that we've experienced. In the collective of this beautiful shadow and light world that we live in, some of those thoughts are really negative. Some of them are detrimental to our own health and well-being at times. Some of them are scary. Some of them, especially if we actually have the thought and there's an action that comes behind it. But a lot of people have a misconception about our thinking, where it's coming from, and how to actually get into alignment with thought process and vibration that we actually want to live by. Do you have anything that you can share with people about what you think about all that?
What do I think about thoughts?
Yeah, like
Yeah,
because but you've been really clear twice. Like you have a good understanding of the fact that the oneness mind is connected to all, and that our brains are picking up those thoughts or receiving those thoughts, and it's up to us to either entertain them or to remove them, release them.
yeah. So the way that I look at it is, I have my own mental sphere of experience, and then there is the mind.
Right.
Mind is everywhere. If you look at the Hermetic principles, the first Hermetic principle is all is mind.
Okay.
It's the first Hermetic principle because everything is made up of mental energy. But we have our own little personal bubble of mental energy that which connects to the all mind. Depending on everyone's individuated purification of that field, it could be distorted, full of limiting beliefs and limiting assumptions. And when we start connecting to the universal mind, it gets distorted.
Right.
So it's distorted according to your own mental field of energy. And I can safely say now, through the contemplative process, that I came to the conclusion that I do not know where my thoughts come from, and that I myself am not choosing them all the time. Now I can choose a positive thought now, which is like, I really love animals, and I'm really love my nephew, and it's amazing, and he's a great guy. Like they're thoughts that I chose, and I worded them with my voice.
Right.
But if I'm not consciously choosing thoughts, then they're just happening through my head. And that happening is like a transmission from I don't know where.
Right.
You could say metaphysical reality or universal mind. But I know that I am being guided because I've tapped into that side of my spiritual path. So
Right.
sometimes when I'm in a deep meditative place, I receive messages from other beings. The reason I say other beings is because I myself am not producing those thoughts.
Right.
I'm in a clear space of emptiness. I know a clear thought will come in and it is guiding me to do something. It's
Yep.
like, tomorrow you're doing this and you're going to do it in this way.
Right.
And you could say that I've created that idea, but in all honesty, at no point did I consciously choose that idea.
Right.
That idea was literally delivered in an envelope and popped into my mind.
Right.
And I'm like, wow. And I open the envelope and I'm like, oh, I'm going to do this tomorrow. That's a great idea. Then my body is in alignment with that idea. And I go, you know what? If I do that idea, I'm going to feel great.
Right.
That's acting on my highest good and the good of all. So this is the thing about thoughts is, beings, call them whatever you want, angels, guides, whatever, your spirit, soul family, spirit guides, are continuously trying to communicate with you, but they can't get through your mental bubble that is full of distortions. So you're retrieving all of these thought processes, and it's all jargon, and it's confusing, and it's this way and it's that way, and I don't know if I should, and I feel bad about it, and I shouldn't do that, and I don't. But once you purify that energy field, then the channel is clear for communication.
Right.
And I am literally only acting on what I have to do for the good of all people. I know that I need to make money, and I need to make a living, and I need to live and pay bills. But at no point do those things concern me. My main objective in life is to educate and inspire people. And all of my thoughts are in alignment with that. What can I do tomorrow to make everyone's life better? What can I do to make my health better? What can I do? And those thoughts are just coming, they're coming. And all I have to do is act on them.
Right.
As they come. And some days I feel like crap, and some days I feel like amazing. And life is at ebbs and flows as you go through your journey. Yeah, so I just think they're transmissions, in all honesty.
That's awesome. I love the way that you just explained that. I think another thing to contribute to what you just said is that the action part, you said, I have these thoughts and then I act on them. And when I act on them, they feel really good. I think that there's a lot of people in the world that get really caught up in receiving really great guidance and then not acting on the guidance.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of like, let's say for example, like putting a weighted blanket on. Every time that you get that feeling or that inspiration to do something and you don't do it, it's like a weighted blanket got put on. And then, you receive another one and you don't do it again and the weighted blanket gets put on. Eventually, you're just underneath this heap of what feels like pressure, of what feels like you can't get out from underneath it, right? And yet really it's the part of the formula is to receive that inspiration and to not do, or to then put it into action. I know that some of my own mental health stuff that I've been challenged with over time like only came from receiving so much information and not doing anything with it, that it's like I was falling behind in my own life, because it's like I wasn't keeping up with what my spirit was actually giving me the opportunity to align with.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And it can be frustrating at times because you're like, why am I not acting? Why? And you realize that later on, you realize that because you weren't meant to. It's
Well, I
okay.
was just going to say timing is everything.
I mean, everything. Sometimes you have
Yeah.
to sit and do nothing for 2 years before that opportunity comes up. And like right now, I'm in a really lovely space where I'm living in England and I'm not in a rush to do anything. If I spend the next 6 months doing nothing and just working on my social media and reading some books and having a shanty time, then I know that's what I feel like doing right now. In
Right.
6 months' time, I might be super ready. I mean, might be in London doing events and stuff, but I don't feel called to do that now. I feel called to do podcasts, interviews, and radio conversations, and it will just naturally, because I am an expanding being. I know
Right.
that my career will just naturally expand because
Amen. Yeah.
that's how careers operate. I don't need to do much. I just need to be myself. And it is back to spirituality, be the self.
Right.
And I think we touched on this, which is spirituality is authenticity.
Right.
The spiritual journey just leads you down to more and more authenticity. So you're super real, you're super honest, you're super authentic, and you're relatable on many levels. People like you, they feel comfortable in your presence, they feel safe, they feel like they're learning or expanding around you. That is what the soul is. The soul is authenticity.
Right. I love that. I think that a lot of people have a difficult time. You just spoke about work, and I love the way that you brought that up, because there's a lot of people in the world that spend time at work, hours upon hours, days upon days, years upon years, hating what they do. And the stress and pressure that comes from feeling like they have to do what they are told they have to do. And it's mind blowing. I mean, like, I guess I'm just an outside the box thinker. I've always been the person that's like, okay, well, I'm going to work there until I don't want to work there anymore, and then I'm going to quit. Or, this is where I move forward. I've never been one of those ones that felt like, okay, well, I need to have a career for 35 years. I have to stay in the same place. I have to make sure that I'm loyal to something that I don't like, whatever that looks like. But a lot of people, this is where that personal power comes back in, when you actually start looking at, what do I prefer? What is my preference? Like, for example, right now, you're feeling the guidance of sitting down and allowing yourself to catch up with yourself. You're letting yourself, look at different avenues of being able to have conversations with people and being able to build your network, let's say, being able to be at home for a bit. As where so now you're in a place where you feel safe, even though there's these outside things that people tell you, well, you're supposed to do it this way. You're supposed to be working. You're supposed to do this, that, or the other. And yet, if you look at like where you're at in your own mental health compares to where some other people are at in their own, because they're engaged in things that they hate doing day in, day out. And people say all the time, well, but I need to be able to survive. Like, I need a paycheck. There are like millions and trillions of things in the world that you could do, especially now with the internet, that you could be making a lot more money and doing something that you love if you're willing to get out of that limited belief of the conformity of society. You need a 9 to 5, even if you don't like your job, you need to stay there. All of the things that make us feel stuck and restricted in our own experience, right?
Yeah, it's a trap.
Yeah, big
So
time.
vocational education is a trap. They
Mm,
educate us to get jobs. They don't educate us to be philosophical mind thinkers. They
right,
don't. They don't. They don't educate us to know thyself.
right.
They educate us to know a certain thing about a certain job, and they just shovel us into
How to
jobs.
function, yeah.
And so they can extract taxes from us. Like that's really the only reason. They don't care what job you do as long as you pay the tax. So yeah, people are suffering at the moment, and I would say people are not suffering because of their jobs. People are suffering because of their mental health. There is a
Right,
huge difference. The
right,
job in and of itself is completely neutral. It's only what you believe about the job that
right,
creates the suffering.
right.
I can go and work at McDonald's tomorrow and have the best time of my life.
Hmm.
I could work at McDonald's the rest of my life and never take a depressed day. I just be like making burgers all day and fries. Why? Because I have good mental health.
Right,
I don't want to do that job. It's not something that interests me. But if I had to do it, I wouldn't suffer as a result of it.
right.
I would just do it and I would make friends with the people I work with and I'd have the odd cheeseburger because why not? And
Mhm.
I like French fries and who doesn't like that? It's not something my skin would get all greasy and I would hate it. But but that's life, like it's the mental, it's what you think about life is what causes your suffering.
Right,
Ultimately, what do you
perception.
believe about yourself is what causes suffering. Life or the universe in and of itself is completely neutral. It has no intrinsic meaning other than the meaning we give it.
Right,
And if you stub your toe and it means that you've got bad luck, then that's your belief. I stub my toe and I look at it, I believe it's a blessing and that money is going to come to me.
right.
Right. So whatever you want to believe about anything is your choice. Like people lose money and they're like, oh, I always lose money. I always lose my wallet. This always happens to me.
Right.
Well, those words are creating the next event.
Hmm.
Well, when I lose money, I go, man, money is always coming to me.
Right.
Money is always coming to me, regardless of what's happening in physical reality. Money is always coming to me.
Right.
So it's all about reconditioning. Even if you have cancer, you can still believe that you're perfectly healthy.
Hmm.
You do not have to believe that you have cancer, even if you have cancer. You
Right.
can still hold on to the belief that you are vibrantly healthy at all times. You're going to live to 100 years old.
Right.
That is a choice.
It's interesting that you say that, and there's a lot of people in the world that feel like it's not a choice, that they didn't take on cancer as a dis-ease, as um
Well, yeah,
a wake up call to themselves.
that's
Okay.
right. Yeah,
And this is where I think our physical health, there's so many different aspects to this. Like, I think a lot of people don't recognize that we have all these illnesses within our body to begin with, and that depending on our mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, cleaning up our trauma states will depend on whether or not those manifest in our experience or whether they won't, or if they have manifested, what that actually means. What is your soul trying to get you to pay attention to? What is the story at the bottom of that ailment that is harboring emotions and energy, creating for that disease to be able to flourish in that space? And I think that that's kind of the interesting piece about where our direction is going in terms of the world, is that we're finally looking at it. I mean, Western medicine, we're still in the old Cartesian model of things. That doesn't work. It doesn't do anything. It only makes us look at one little aspect of the physical being. And then if the medication doesn't work, then well, sorry, you're dying. But there's so many different steps that we have the opportunity to take in between when we go through a process of hearing anything about an ailment or dis-ease activating within us. And this is where I feel like, we've seen hundreds and thousands of people along the way where someone gets cancer and their brain believes the doctor when the doctor says you only have a couple of months to live, and bam, before you know it, they're dead. And then there's other people that get that same diagnosis, and they might be told like, oh, it's a way more developed, it's going to happen quickly, it's going to accelerate things really quick, and then they're alive years and years and years later because it was the supportive program or foundation that they created within them to actually remember how to use the body to heal versus use the body to suffocate and just pass, right?
yeah, that's exactly right. And just literally, Jesus just came into my mind. One of the most profound teachings he says is, "As you believe, so it will be done unto you."
Right.
But Jesus, in one of the books I'm reading, is a historical book about Jesus, and he basically, whenever he was healing people, he would heal them according to their faith,
Right.
according to their belief and faith was what level they got healed. Sometimes he'd go over to heal people, and they wouldn't be healed.
Right.
And he's like, well, you don't believe. As you believe, so it will be done unto you.
Right.
I may be a healer, but if you don't believe, you
You're
go
not taking
over
it
to the
in.
next person, goes over
Right.
to an old lady who has such faith and
Right.
belief, easy to heal.
Right.
So it literally comes down to the individual and what their belief structures are. And this is why beliefs are so important, because it literally is dictating every area of your existence: money, relationships, health, mental health, your career. Everything is dictated by belief structures.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm not even a religious person, but even if you wrote that on the wall, ask and thou shalt receive, knock and the door will be opened unto you.
Right.
As you believe, so it will be done unto you. Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do.
That's
All
one
of
of my
these,
favorite things ever.
they are profound philosophical spiritual teachings, regardless of what your religious connotations are.
Yeah.
And you can live according to the truth of what Jesus came here to say, without reading the Bible, without going to church, without praying to some pope. You don't need to do any of that. Just live according to the teaching, the philosophical teachings of each individual. Buddha, Jesus, Muhammad, they're all beautiful individuals who shared love and wisdom with the world. And the more I've understood all of this, the more my life is completely unfolded in a beautiful way. So it is belief. As you believe, so it will be done unto you. And I had this chat with a friend, Susanna, and I told her that I was a mind reader. I could literally read people's minds. And she was like, no, I don't believe you. And I said, well, I can read people's minds. And this is how I do it. I just listen to the words that are coming out of their mouth. Because words are extensions of thoughts. Words are physical vibrations of thoughts and belief structures. So if you understand that, as people talk, you read their mind.
Right.
And as a coach, as a mentor and a coach, I listen to what people are saying and I say, are you aware that you have positioned yourself in this position?
Right.
In relation to this issue that you're having? Are you aware that you've positioned yourself as a victim in relation to this incident?
Right.
And they go, wow, I never thought of that. And I'm basically reading their belief structures because I'm listening to where they're positioning themselves in relation to life.
Yeah, I love that. I've I experienced a lot on my own. I've never heard it in that way. That's really, really beautifully said. That was awesome.
Yeah, it's just words are a verbalization of thoughts. Like if you can read someone's entire history by listening to what they're saying.
Right. It's crazy, eh? But I think that that's also a beautiful part about you allowing yourself to be a part of the experience. Like, you don't just show up, like physically, you're not just there being like, oh, okay, like you let your heart feel things, you let your mind pick up on things, you watch things, like you're involved, you're active in your own experiences, right?
Yeah. And because the mind's not pulling me away left, right, and center anymore, when I'm talking to someone, I'm just completely focused on what they're doing.
Right.
I'm not even trying to think of a response.
Yeah.
When you have an enlightened experience, you don't even need to care about responses. I don't need to prepare anything. We don't need to prepare anything.
Right.
You don't need to have notes about what I'm going to say during this interview. I don't need to prearrange anything because only the mind wants to do that.
Right.
The mind wants to structure it. It wants to know in advance stuff. But when you're out of your mind,
I love that.
Chris is out of his mind.
I'm out of my mind too. It's all good.
When you've purified that mental part, there's no need to. I could talk about spiritual philosophy and mental health for thousands of years because it's just you just become a channel through which the information is coming through, and that is inexhaustible. The spirit, the soul, the essence of yourself doesn't have an end. So you just become an instrument through which knowledge is spoken.
Right.
And that's the beautiful thing about this experience is as everyone's awakening, like popcorn kernels awakening, popping at different times, everyone's finding their way. And you'll find at this time, a lot of souls are here to help.
Right.
There's a lot of people on this planet doing amazing things to help millions of people. Tony Robbins, I mentioned earlier, but there are hundreds, if not hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people continuously working very hard to make this world a wonderful and beautiful place.
And providing education, information for people to choose to use to make it beautiful if they so choose, right?
That's right. Just by creating this content, it goes on the internet. It's then available to anyone on the internet.
Right.
And whoever watches it and resonates with it and learns something from it, they'll go into their life vibrating differently.
Right.
So if we can get 1,000 people watching this, that's 1,000 people vibrating differently at a different speed. They're in their lives helping other people. So the ricochet, the ramifications of this discussion will echo throughout the internet forever, because in 1,000 years, someone will be able to access this video.
Right. Right.
At some point in 1,000 years, they'll be watching, oh, there's a Chris and there's a Victoria, and they had this chat about mental health in 2022. And wow, this is where people were at that time.
Right. Exactly. I
In
love
1,000
that.
years, there might not be
so
mental health.
fascinating.
Yeah.
It is. It's so fascinating.
What do you want to do in terms of time?
What time is it?
It's 10:15.
Oh, it's getting late on your end. Yeah. Okay. Well, how about we...
So let me ask you a question. What takeaway? Let's summarize our entire chat. What advice would you give the listener or the watcher of this video in terms of mental health tips of what they can do today, tomorrow, or this week that can incrementally help them move forward with their mental health?
So for myself, there's a technique that I am open to using. Would you like me to teach you the technique that you can use with us too? Okay, so there's a couple of things. One of them is that remind yourself of breathing, getting into breathing. We do not, we take our breathing for granted day in, day out. And if we could take the opportunity to move from our heads into our heart space and allow for our energy to be moving through our heart versus just spinning in our head, it definitely helps us ground. So any sort of breathing techniques of taking some breaths in and moving our energy through our heart is definitely a suggestion. There's lots of tools and techniques that I've got tucked in my pocket. I can't bust them all out at once because we're going to be doing this over and over. But I will show a technique today that is a general balancing technique through the body talk modality. Okay. So body talk is just a modality of energy healing and energy medicine as well.
Yeah.
And there is this technique that we can use that helps balance the left and the right hemisphere of the brain so that they're actually working coherently versus trying to battle for the dominant position. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our hand and we're just going to place it. If you take where your thumb is and you just place that on the very back of the skull where the neck and the head meet. And we're just going to take a nice deep breath. Now I'm going to explain something really quick because we're going to be tapping over the top of our head. And this is going to indicate to the brain that there's a change coming. When we tap over top of our heart, this is going to show us that it's going to send that change through the body. And then we're going to tap overneath our gut brain, and that's to solidify the changes in the body. So we're going to take 2 deep breaths for each hand position together. Okay. Okay, so let's go ahead. We're going to take a nice deep breath. We can just tap on the top of our heads at the same time as we're doing it. You can just tap over your heart and then tap over the gut. We're just going to do that for another nice deep breath. So we can go back up over the head. You can tap over the heart and tap over the gut. Now, where your baby finger is on the back of your head, we're going to move our thumb back to that place. And we're going to stretch our hand out again right over our head. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to take 2 nice deep breaths. Tapping over the head, over the heart, and over the gut. So for people that have really small hands, you're gonna have to do this more often. I have really big hands, so I only have to do those 4 hand positions. So then we just go to our forehead, over our forehead as well. We're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna take a nice deep breath. Good, you're shifting. I love
Ah,
it when people are either shaking, yawning,
I
burping,
love it.
they're shifting.
As soon as I started this, I felt the energy moving. I
Yeah,
knew
yeah,
I'd
yeah.
yawn. I knew I would yawn at some point.
Yeah, interesting. So
I could
then, sorry, what?
I could literally feel the energy field
Yeah, it's
change.
pretty cool, eh? So then our last one, we're just gonna put our hands on both sides of the temple for a second, and we're just gonna take, this is for just an attention point, but then we're just gonna use one of our hands again, doing our tapping as we take a nice deep breath. I always like to bring my hands back to my temples for a second just because it feels good to me, but you don't have to. You could just tap.
So for anyone watching this, yawning is a mechanism the body uses to release energy.
Right.
So it's a dissipation of energy. So if you feel when you're going for a healing modality and you start yawning, this is perfect because you're
Mm-hmm.
shifting energy in your body.
Right. So
That was
that is, yeah, I know, right? Like you have to like shake it out. It's like, so a part of this is that I always recommend to people. I do a thing usually every year for a couple of months where I do a group with people doing this cortices technique. There's so many things to say about it, and we can actually, I will share in maybe our next session some more of the intricate details about what cortices actually does, other than just realign that left and the right hand brain. But if you use this, I definitely recommend for anyone to try this technique for 1 month. I mean, even if you only do it for 1 week, you're going to watch things really shift in your life. But if you do that for 30 days, you're literally going to watch this whole new cycle of things just like start for you. It's the brain, once it actually has the opportunity to become cohesive and actually work with itself and for itself, it is incredible how quickly we can tap into things, how quickly we can shift things, how quickly we can emotionally regulate and mentally regulate ourselves. It is just amazing.
is amazing. Life is amazing.
It is.
Um,
So how about
but
yourself? What's
my
a tip or
my
trick that you'd like to leave?
I would say love yourself enough to take care of your mental and emotional health. That's the only advice I can give. Love yourself enough today to do 1%, half a percent a day. Read one page of a book. Sit down for 5 minutes to meditate. Do some breath work. Doesn't matter what it is. You choose, you decide, but love yourself enough to do it. To take care of yourself. Give yourself what it is. Give yourself the true self, not your false self. Give your true self what it actually wants. Now, this is a message for anyone who actually wants to do that. A lot of souls have incarnated here to suffer. And this is another thing that we have to remember. Like a lot of people want to suffer because this is a wonderful opportunity to suffer because there's no suffering when you're a soul. So we come here to experience what it's like to feel suffering. So whoever's watching this and has got this far in the 2-hour presentation will be actively seeking change in their life in some
Right.
level. So I thank you all for watching. We really appreciate this. And so
Yes,
sending you
you.
all our love.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to see how